Have you ever heard a voice so beautiful it felt wrong, a voice that lured you in, even when every part of your body screamed to run? That's the question the group should have asked before stepping foot on Blackwater Cove, a stretch of shoreline whispered about in half-forgotten legends. But college kids rarely think of legends, especially when the ocean is glittering under the sun, and the cliffs rise like guardians at the edge of the world. The trip had started innocently enough. 6 friends, Ava, her boyfriend Dylan, best friends Marcus and Lily, and the twins Carter and Claire, had packed coolers, blankets, and portable speakers, determined to spend a weekend free of deadlines, exams, and the suffocating pressure of campus life. The cove had been recommended by another student who claimed it was secluded, untouched, and perfect for partying without being bothered. The directions were vague, requiring a long drive down winding coastal roads, followed by a hike through dense forest. By the time they stumbled onto the beach, the sun was dipping low, staining the waves in hues of orange and gold. The place was stunning, almost too stunning. Jagged cliffs framed the beach on both sides, their black stones slick with salt spray. Strange white carvings, eroded but still visible, etched themselves into the rock faces like scars left by ancient hands. The sand glittered faintly, speckled with shells they didn't recognize, and when the tide rolled back, it revealed long cracks in the stone as if the earth itself was stitched together poorly. "Looks like a scene from a postcard," Lily said, snapping a photo on her phone. She tried to laugh it off, but Ava noticed the way she lingered near Marcus, as if needing his presence to stay grounded. They set up camp quickly, tents pitched in a semicircle, a bonfire coaxed to life in the middle. Music played, drinks passed hands, and laughter mingled with the crash of waves. For a while, it was perfect, a blur of warmth, firelight, and the intoxicating freedom of youth. But as night deepened, the wind changed. It carried something faint, almost indistinguishable at first. A note, just a single note, long and mournful, that slid between the gusts like silk on skin. Ava froze mid-laugh, tilting her head. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the fire's crackle. "Hear what?" Dylan asked, pulling her closer, half distracted as he reached for another beer. "That, singing." The group went quiet, straining their ears. And then it came again, stronger this time. Not music from a speaker, not a tune drifting from another campsite. This was different. A haunting melody that seemed to come from the cliffs themselves, weaving through the crash of waves, carrying words they couldn't quite make out but felt in their bones. Claire shivered, hugging herself. "It's just the wind," she said quickly, too quickly, her voice trembling. But Marcus's brow furrowed. "No. That's a voice. Someone's up there." He stood, scanning the cliffside, the firelight casting long shadows behind him. The singing rose, sweeter, clearer, threading into their minds like honeyed poison. Ava felt her chest tighten, her pulse quicken. It wasn't just sound, it was invitation. A beckoning. She glanced around and saw the same distant, glazed look flicker across Dylan's face, as if he were listening to a private conversation no one else could hear. Then, suddenly, the song stopped. The silence it left behind was suffocating, louder than any music they'd been playing before. Marcus broke it with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Local weirdos trying to freak us out," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. They tried to shake it off, returning to the fire, the drinks, the forced chatter. But none of them admitted that the melody hadn't really left. It lingered, faint but persistent, echoing in the corners of their thoughts, growing louder every time the waves receded. And when the tide pulled back further than it had all night, exposing jagged stones slick with seaweed, Ava thought she saw movement, something pale and human-shaped slipping beneath the waves, its long hair streaming behind it like sea foam. Her drink soured in her throat. She turned back to the fire, but the laughter of her friends no longer comforted her. Instead, it sounded fragile, temporary, and terribly out of place against the endless song whispering from the cliffs. The fire burned lower as the night stretched on, its glow turning from golden warmth to a dull red pulse against the sand. The group had retreated into uneasy chatter, trying to mask their discomfort with forced jokes and louder music, but the song still lingered. It would drift into their minds in sudden waves, sometimes so faint they questioned whether they'd imagined it, other times so sharp it felt like a whisper directly into their ears. Dylan, always the daring one, stood up with a lopsided grin, swaying slightly from the beer. "You guys are acting like a bunch of scared kids. It's probably just some fisherman singing or something. Maybe we should go check it out." His voice was playful, but his eyes, glassy and distant, betrayed him. "No," Ava said quickly, grabbing his wrist. Her voice shook with more urgency than she intended. "We don't even know what's up there. Could be dangerous." "Dangerous?" Dylan laughed, though the sound carried no humor. He pulled free of her grip and gestured toward the cliffs. "It's just music. It's beautiful. Don't you hear it? Like it's calling for us." Marcus snorted. "Yeah, man, that's exactly why we don't go wandering off. That's how people end up on missing posters." But Dylan was no longer listening. His gaze was locked on the cliffside, where shadows twisted against the jagged stone, the waves reflecting faint slivers of moonlight onto the black rock. For a moment, Ava thought she saw his lips moving, as if he were murmuring back to the voice only he could hear. Lily tried to diffuse the tension. "Guys, let's just ignore it. Whoever's singing probably wants attention. Don't give it to them." But then the voice rose again, clearer, more distinct. This time there was no mistaking it, a woman's voice, soft and lilting, carrying a melody that curved like a smile too sharp to be friendly. The words were unintelligible, but the tone was sweet, coaxing, dripping with promise. And Dylan moved. It wasn't a decision, not really. One moment he was standing near the fire, the next he was walking across the sand, his steps slow, deliberate, as if he were half asleep. Ava shot up, panic jolting through her. "Dylan," she shouted, running after him. Marcus followed, his flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, but Dylan's pace never faltered. He didn't turn when Ava called his name again. He didn't stop when Claire screamed for him to come back. His eyes were fixed upward, toward the jagged trail that led to the cliffs. The group scrambled after him, their feet sinking into the cold sand. The song grew louder with every step, curling around them like invisible fingers. Ava could feel it pressing against her skull, prying into her thoughts. For a fleeting, horrifying moment, she understood, why wouldn't he follow? The voice promised peace, warmth, something just out of reach. She felt herself leaning into it, her own steps faltering toward the rocks. Marcus's hand clamped around her arm, jerking her back. His face was pale, his jaw tight. "Don't listen," he hissed, though his own voice trembled. "It's not real. It's not." Dylan had already reached the base of the cliff. The path upward was narrow and treacherous, cut into the stone like a scar. He climbed without hesitation, his movements oddly smooth, as though guided by something unseen. The group froze at the bottom, torn between fear and helplessness. The cliffs loomed above them, black teeth against the night sky, and the song was pouring down now, rich and intoxicating, drowning out the crash of the waves. "Dylan, stop." Ava's scream was ragged, tearing her throat raw. But Dylan didn't look back. He kept climbing, his body swallowed by shadows as he disappeared around a bend. Then came the silence. The song ceased abruptly, cut off mid-note. The only sound was the restless ocean below. For a long moment, no one breathed. And then, drifting down from the cliffside, came the sound of fabric tearing, long, deliberate, like cloth being pulled apart. Something fluttered in the wind, catching the faint glow of the moon. A piece of Dylan's shirt, snagged on the rocks, drifting down toward the beach. Ava's scream shattered the stillness, echoing against the cliffs, swallowed almost instantly by the endless roar of the sea. For several minutes after Dylan's shirt fragment drifted down, no one moved. The fire sputtered in the distance, forgotten, casting a weak orange glow that seemed pitiful against the looming cliffs. Ava's hands shook violently as she clutched the torn fabric to her chest. It smelled faintly of salt and Dylan's cologne, a detail so mundane it made her stomach twist in horror. He was gone, vanished into the black jaws of the cliffs with nothing but a haunting melody to explain why. Marcus broke the silence first, his voice sharp with denial. He's still up there. He probably climbed too far ahead and we lost sight of him. He swung his flashlight toward the cliffside, the beam sweeping across jagged rock and shadow. Nothing. Just the relentless crash of the tide. Lily's voice cracked. Marcus, we saw him disappear. There's no path up there, just stone. You saw what happened. No, Marcus snapped, louder this time. His eyes were wide, feverish. We're not going to sit here and pretend he just vanished into thin air. People don't just, his voice faltered, breaking under the weight of his own words. We can't let this place get into our heads. But it already had. The group gathered back near the fire, its embers glowing weakly. Ava sat close to it, knees hugged tight to her chest, Dylan's shirt clutched like a lifeline. Claire paced in restless circles, muttering to herself, while Carter tried to keep his twin still. Lily hovered near Marcus, her eyes darting constantly to the cliffs as if expecting the voice to return at any moment. When it did, it wasn't with singing. It was with a sound that chilled them even more, laughter. Soft, lilting laughter that rose and fell with the tide, echoing down from the cliffs in waves. It was a woman's laugh, playful, teasing, almost affectionate, and underneath it, woven so faintly they almost missed it, came a man's voice. Dylan's voice. Ava froze. She knew his tone, his cadence. He was answering the laugh, speaking words too faint to understand but unmistakably his. She staggered to her feet, clutching the shirt tighter, her breath coming in sharp bursts. That's him. Oh my God, that's him up there. No, Claire hissed, eyes wide, her voice trembling like glass on the verge of shattering. No, it's not him. It can't be. That's what it wants you to think. The group stared up at the cliffs, caught between hope and horror. And then Lily's shriek split the night. The tide. They spun toward the shoreline. In their panic, they hadn't noticed how much the water had crept in. The beach had been wide when they arrived, but now the ocean had swallowed half of it, the waves surging closer with each crash. What little dry sand remained was shrinking by the minute, pressing them closer to the cliffs. Marcus cursed, grabbing the nearest cooler. We have to pack up. We need to leave, now. But when they turned toward the path they'd taken earlier through the forest, their blood ran cold. The narrow strip of sand leading to the trail was already gone, consumed by water that churned violently in the moonlight. The tide had risen unnaturally fast, cutting them off completely. We're trapped, Carter whispered, his voice small, almost childlike. The fire hissed as sea spray doused the flames, plunging them into deeper shadow. The only light came from the moon, silver and cold, and the reflection of the waves, which seemed to reach farther with each crash. The cliffs loomed higher now, oppressive, hemming them in like prisoners. The laughter returned, louder this time, carried on the wind like taunts. And mixed into it, Ava swore she heard Dylan calling her name. Her knees buckled, and Marcus caught her before she could stumble into the surf. His grip was iron hard, his own fear barely contained. Don't listen, he said through gritted teeth, his eyes darting toward the black wall of rock. No matter what you hear, don't you dare listen. But Ava's mind was already unraveling. Because if Dylan was alive, if he really was calling to her from somewhere up there, how could she not listen? The water surged higher with each passing wave, forcing the group closer to the base of the cliffs. Their fire had been reduced to a pitiful glow, drowned by sea spray, leaving them with nothing but the pale, merciless light of the moon. Every crash of the tide was deafening now, as though the ocean itself were mocking their fear, pushing them toward the jagged wall of rock with deliberate cruelty. We can't stay here, Marcus said finally, his voice taut with urgency. He lifted the flashlight, its beam sweeping across the cliff face. There has to be a way up. Some higher ground, something. No one argued. Even Claire, who had spent most of the night pacing in a daze, nodded stiffly. The reality was obvious, if they stayed where they were, the tide would claim them before morning. They had no choice but to climb. The group gathered their things quickly, though it felt absurd to clutch coolers and blankets when the ocean was licking at their heels. They abandoned most of it, leaving behind half their gear, and pressed against the cliff wall. The stone was slick with algae and spray, its surface uneven, riddled with cracks that suggested a possible, if treacherous, path upward. Marcus went first, his flashlight clenched between his teeth as he gripped the rock. The beam illuminated patches of the wall as he climbed, revealing more than he intended. Strange markings etched into the stone, faint but undeniable. They weren't natural. They were deliberate. "Hold up," he muttered, his voice muffled by the light in his mouth. He reached out with one hand, brushing the grooves. Symbols. Carvings that spiraled and twisted into shapes none of them recognized. Some resembled waves, others looked like eyes, and some were so crude and worn down they could have been nothing, or everything. "What is it?" Lily called from below, her voice trembling. "Carvings," Marcus said. He pulled the flashlight from his mouth, angling it so the others could see. The beam revealed more of them, stretching higher, carved deep into the cliff as though someone, or many people, had climbed these rocks before and left their mark. Ava's stomach nodded. "Who would do that out here?" Claire answered without looking at her, her voice flat, almost lifeless. "Offerings." The word sank into the group like a stone. Claire stood at the base, staring blankly at the markings as if she'd seen them before. Her twin tugged at her arm nervously. "Claire, don't start with that." But she didn't stop. They used to leave things for them, the Sirens. Food. Jewelry. Sometimes, her eyes flicked upward, meeting Ava's, unblinking. Sometimes people. A heavy silence followed. The waves filled it, thundering against the cliffside, spraying salt into their faces. Ava's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break her ribs. She wanted to argue, to tell Claire she was being ridiculous, but something in her tone, cold, certain, almost reverent, left her frozen. Marcus gritted his teeth. "We're not listening to this crap right now. We need to move." He climbed higher, his movements sharper, more forceful, as though defying the words. The rest followed reluctantly, hands slipping on wet stone, legs shaking with the strain. The higher they climbed, the more carvings they found, scattered and chaotic, spiraling out from the cracks in the rock. In some places, small objects had been jammed into the crevices, bones bleached white by salt, seashells strung together on frayed twine, a rusted coin pressed so deep it seemed fused to the stone. Lily gasped, her foot nearly slipping. "Oh my God, this isn't random. Someone's been feeding them." The group paused, their breathing ragged, the weight of the words sinking in. The Sirens weren't just stories whispered to scare children. Someone had believed in them enough to leave offerings. Someone had stood in this exact place, centuries ago or maybe even just years, listening to the same song. And perhaps, Ava thought with dread pooling in her chest, they hadn't all left the cliff alive. The song returned then, faint but closer this time. A woman's voice, sweet and mournful, curling around them like smoke. The melody wasn't distant anymore. It was rising from the cracks in the cliff itself, seeping through stone as if the mountain were hollow and alive. Ava pressed against the rock, her nails digging into the wet surface. The song slid into her bones, filling her veins with warmth and terror. And just beneath it, softer but unmistakable, came Dylan's voice again. Calling her name. The climb felt endless, every stretch of muscle burning as they pulled themselves upward. The ocean's roar faded slightly the higher they went, but the song, the haunting melody, did not. If anything, it grew sharper, clearer, as though the source of it was waiting for them just ahead. The voices overlapped now, more than one, weaving together in a harmony that made Ava's skin crawl. It was too beautiful to be natural, too perfect to be human. Marcus reached a narrow ledge first, hauling himself onto it with a grunt. He turned to help Lily, who was trembling so violently her hands kept slipping on the rock. One by one, they gathered on the ledge, pressed shoulder to shoulder, gasping for breath. The flashlight beam wavered, casting erratic shadows across the cliff face, until it froze on something unusual, a dark fissure in the stone, wide enough for a person to slip through. At first, Ava thought it was just a crack, one of the many jagged scars carved into the cliffside by centuries of crashing waves. But the longer she stared, the more wrong it felt. The edges were too smooth, too deliberate, as if chiseled open by hands that knew exactly what they were doing. The black void beyond the opening swallowed the light like ink, refusing to give up its secrets. Marcus stepped closer, raising the flashlight. The beam cut into the crevice just enough to reveal stone walls curving inward like a tunnel. Carvings covered the inside, deeper and more intricate than the ones on the outer cliff. Swirls of waves, symbols resembling fish or serpents, and, most disturbing, crude shapes of women with flowing hair, their mouths open as though in song. Their eyes were gouged hollow, leaving black pits that seemed to stare back. "No," Lily whispered, shaking her head violently. "No way. We're not going in there." But Claire's gaze was fixed on the opening, transfixed. She didn't blink. Her lips moved soundlessly, as if she were repeating words only she could hear. Her twin tugged her sleeve in desperation, but Claire didn't flinch. Instead, she whispered, barely audible over the waves, "That's where they live." Ava felt her stomach twist. "What are you talking about?" Claire's eyes shifted to hers, glazed and distant. "The cavern. Beneath the cliffs. It's always been there. That's why the song carries so far. That's where they keep what they take." The words hung heavy in the salt-soaked air. Nobody wanted to believe her, but deep down, Ava felt it, the pull of the crevice, the chill radiating from it, the way the song seemed to hum louder the closer they stood. It was as if the stone itself were vibrating with the melody, beckoning them forward. Marcus cursed under his breath. "We're not doing this. It's a dead end. We'll get trapped." But even as he said it, his hand hovered near the entrance, fingers brushing the cool stone. He swallowed hard, and his voice lost its conviction. But it might be the only way out. The tide below was relentless, waves pounding higher and higher, cutting off any thought of descending. The cliff above was jagged, sheer, and slick with spray. The only possible path, the only choice, was into the darkness. The group stood in paralyzed silence. Ava's pulse thundered in her ears. She knew it was insane. Every part of her screamed to stay away from the opening. And yet, Dylan's voice came again. Soft. Gentle. Whispering her name with the same warmth it always had. Her chest constricted. She took a step toward the crevice before she realized what she was doing. The darkness seemed to breathe with her, inhale when she inhaled, exhale when she exhaled. It wasn't just an opening in the rock, it was alive. And as the group hesitated on the ledge, the song changed. It grew lower, deeper, almost impatient. Like the voices beyond were no longer singing to entice them, but commanding them. The decision was not really a decision at all, it was desperation. The ocean below them was no longer a retreat but a trap, swallowing the base of the cliff in violent surges. Spray leapt high enough to sting their faces, the sound deafening as water slammed rock with the fury of 1,000 fists. To climb higher was nearly impossible, the stone was jagged but slick, sheer in places, and the ledge they stood on was already trembling from the waves battering beneath. That left the opening, dark, unnatural, and waiting. Marcus was the first to move. He drew in a sharp breath, muttered a curse, and ducked into the crevice with the flashlight clenched in one hand. His shoulders brushed stone on either side, and for a second he looked impossibly small, swallowed by the earth itself. Lily whimpered but followed, clinging to his shirt as though he were the last tether keeping her from being dragged into the abyss. Claire moved next, unblinking, her lips still murmuring to some unheard rhythm. Her twin trailed nervously behind, eyes darting everywhere, as if expecting hands to burst from the walls. Ava was the last. She hesitated at the mouth of the cavern, torn between the instinct to run and the stronger instinct to stay close to the others. The song was louder here, vibrating through the stone, threading through her bones like marrow-deep music. She felt Dylan in it, as if his very soul was strung within those notes, calling her forward. Shivering, she stepped inside. The tunnel was narrow at first, forcing them to move single file. The air was damp and smelled of brine, moss, and something coppery, something that made Ava's stomach twist with nausea. The floor sloped gradually downward, slick with moisture, and the further they walked, the less the flashlight seemed to matter. There was light here, not bright, not natural, but faintly glowing veins along the walls, pulsing like bioluminescent algae. It cast the carvings into ghostly relief, more women with hollow eyes and open mouths, more waves and spirals, more crude depictions of figures kneeling, their faces turned upward toward looming, monstrous shapes. Lily gasped suddenly, pointing to a corner. The beam of Marcus's light revealed a pile of objects, metal, leather, and bone all jumbled together. At first glance, it looked like debris from the sea, flotsam washed in by storms. But as Marcus tilted the light, the truth became sickeningly clear. A rusted wristwatch. A half-rotted sneaker. The splintered frame of a pair of glasses. Among them, white shards unmistakable as human bones. Jesus Christ, Marcus whispered, the words barely escaping his throat. Lily stumbled backward, gagging, while Claire only stared, her expression eerily blank. Ava wanted to scream, but the cavern swallowed the sound before it left her lips. The melody around them had shifted again, rising and falling in waves, as though amused by their discovery. They pressed on, deeper into the bowels of the cliff. The tunnel widened abruptly into a chamber, and here the faint glow was stronger, illuminating the space with an otherworldly shimmer. The chamber's ceiling arched high overhead, dripping with condensation that plinked into a pool at the center of the floor. The pool wasn't water, not entirely. Its surface shimmered strangely, too thick, too dark. When Marcus swept the flashlight across it, the beam refracted, bending unnaturally as though the liquid itself resisted being seen. On the far side of the chamber, more relics were scattered, whole piles of them. Clothing, jewelry, personal items, arranged with eerie care. Some were displayed on ledges, as if trophies. Others were hung on the walls, impaled by sharpened stones. And everywhere, scattered between them, were bones. Ava's breath came in ragged gasps. She wanted to turn back, to claw her way out of this nightmare, but her feet wouldn't move. Her gaze locked on a dark patch in the far corner where something glistened faintly in the glow. She squinted, taking a step forward, when a hand shot out and grabbed hers. It was Claire. Her eyes were wide now, no longer glazed but terrified, as though she had finally broken free from whatever spell had been on her. She shook her head violently, whispering, "Don't look too long. They like it when you look." Before Ava could respond, a ripple disturbed the pool in the chamber's center. The sound was soft at first, like water disturbed by a pebble, but then it grew, a bubbling, hissing churn that made the entire cavern tremble. Marcus raised the light, aiming it toward the pool just as something broke the surface. A pale hand. Thin, impossibly long fingers curled over the edge of the stone, nails black and sharp. Then another hand followed, gripping the ledge with unnatural strength. Slowly, agonizingly slow, a head emerged, wet, hair clinging like strands of seaweed, skin pale and luminous under the bioluminescent glow. The face was too beautiful, impossibly symmetrical, lips parting slightly as though humming the very song that had lured them here. And yet her eyes, black, bottomless pits, betrayed no humanity. The siren had surfaced. And behind her, more shadows writhed beneath the pool's surface, shapes moving with deliberate grace. They were not alone. The chamber filled with a sound that was no longer just a song but a living thing. It slithered along the walls, coiled around their throats, pressed into their ears like soft, invisible fingers. The siren in the pool rose higher, water sluicing down her pale shoulders, her long hair clinging like seaweed. She smiled at them, an expression that should have been inviting, beautiful even, but instead carried the cold cruelty of something that had perfected mimicry without ever understanding humanity. Her lips parted, and she began to sing. It was not words at first, just a sound that seemed to reach inside each of them, plucking strings they didn't know existed. Ava's chest tightened. Her body betrayed her, trembling with a longing she couldn't name. The melody was Dylan's laughter, his whispers in her ear, the way he used to hum to her when they walked home late at night. Every note was him, alive, waiting, just out of reach. Beside her, Lily gasped and stumbled forward, her eyes wide and glassy. Ava caught her wrist, but Lily jerked free, her expression filled with desperate yearning. She was hearing something else, someone else. The siren's voice had shifted for her, morphing, adapting. Lily murmured a name, barely audible, but the ache in her tone told Ava everything. Claire's twin collapsed to her knees, hands clamped over her ears, yet tears still streamed down her face. She knows, the girl sobbed. She knows everything. She's saying things I've never told anyone. Marcus was silent, his jaw clenched, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted back and forth, unfocused, as if you were watching someone move in the shadows of the chamber. His breathing grew shallow, ragged, and his grip on the flashlight wavered. The siren song was no longer one voice, it was many. The chamber reverberated with layers of melody, high and low, soft and sharp, weaving together until it seemed as if the stone itself was humming. From the pool, more figures began to surface. 3, 4, their movements elegant, inhumanly fluid. Each one wore a different face, yet all shared the same unholy beauty, perfect features that belonged on statues, hair that rippled as if underwater, and eyes that remained black voids no matter the face they wore. Ava realized the truth then. They were not singing to the group. They were singing through them, tuning themselves to the deepest cracks inside each of their hearts. The song was a mirror, reflecting back whatever each person most longed for, most feared, most regretted. She tried to look away, to anchor herself in the reality of the cavern, but Dylan's voice wrapped tighter around her, whispering promises that only he had ever known. Her breath hitched as her eyes welled. For one terrible moment, she believed he could be standing there, believed she could reach out and touch him, believed she could pull him back from wherever he had vanished. Then Claire's hand gripped hers again, nails biting into her skin hard enough to break the trance. Ava turned to her, startled, and saw terror blazing in Claire's eyes. "Don't listen," she hissed, her voice hoarse. "That's not him. It's never them. It's always just them." Her words snapped through the fog in Ava's brain like lightning. She gasped and tore her gaze away from the sirens, clenching her fists to stop herself from moving toward the pool. But Lily hadn't broken free. She was already stepping closer, her shoes scraping the slick stone, her trembling arms reaching toward the water. Marcus lunged forward and grabbed her, hauling her back with a curse. She screamed, thrashing in his grip, her voice breaking into sobs. "Don't stop me. He's right there. I can see him. Don't you hear him calling me?" The sirens laughed. It was a terrible sound, layered and echoing, but still melodic, still deceptively sweet. Their laughter rippled through the chamber like a tide, mocking and indulgent, as though this struggle had happened countless times before. The pool churned again, and one of the sirens fully emerged, her body sleek and pale, but wrong. Her legs were not legs at all but something serpentine, twisting and tapering into a tail like some nightmarish eel. She slithered out of the water with disturbing grace, her black eyes never leaving the group. "Stay back!" Marcus shouted, brandishing the flashlight like a weapon. His voice cracked with panic, and the trembling beam shook wildly across the chamber. The siren tilted her head, amused. Then she sang one perfect note, sharp, piercing, and the light in Marcus's hand sputtered and went dark. Darkness swallowed them, leaving only the faint, eerie glow of the cavern walls and the siren's luminous skin. Ava's heart plummeted. The song rose again, stronger, surrounding them from every side. And for the first time since entering the cavern, Ava realized they were prey. The cavern breathed with them now, its humid air pulsing to the rhythm of the siren's song. In the wavering glow of the walls, their luminous bodies gleamed like statues carved from salt and bone. Without Marcus's flashlight, every corner felt alive, shadows writhing, water rippling. The sirens moved closer, their movements both predatory and impossibly graceful, their hair flowing though there was no current here. Ava's pulse hammered in her throat. The song was everywhere at once, inside her ears, under her skin, even vibrating in her teeth. She tried to focus on the sting of Claire's fingernails still dug into her hand, the grounding sensation of pain, but Dylan's voice was already slipping back into her mind, warm and persuasive. He was whispering her name with such tenderness that for a heartbeat, she nearly believed he was standing behind her, waiting for her to turn. Lily wasn't fighting it anymore. Her sobs had quieted, her body going slack in Marcus's grip. Her face had softened into an expression of blissful surrender, eyes wide and glistening as if she were watching a miracle unfold. "He's here," she whispered dreamily. "I can see him. He's holding out his hand." "Shut up, Lily," Marcus growled, shaking her violently. "That's not him, it's..." His voice cut off with a sharp gasp. His own body stiffened, his jaw clenching as though invisible hands were gripping his throat. His eyes darted wildly in the half-light, and his lips moved without sound. Ava's stomach dropped. Whatever he was seeing, it had seized him too. His grip on Lily loosened, his strength faltering as his own illusion drew him in. Then it happened in a blur. Lily wrenched free, stumbling toward the pool with outstretched arms. "I'm coming," she cried, her voice breaking into a laugh edged with hysteria. "No!" Ava screamed, lunging forward. But the sirens were faster. The one closest to the pool unfurled her wet hair with a whip-like snap, strands glistening like threads of oil. They coiled around Lily's wrist, yanking her toward the black water. She didn't resist, she smiled, even laughed, as the siren pulled her closer. Marcus came to, roaring, and dove after her. He caught Lily's other arm, digging his heels into the slick stone, muscles straining with every ounce of his strength. For a moment, it was a terrible tug-of-war, Lily suspended between human hands and something inhuman, her body twisting unnaturally under the force. "Help me!" Marcus bellowed, veins bulging in his neck. Ava darted forward, gripping Lily's waist, trying to pull her back. Claire's twin joined, sobbing, grabbing Lily's ankles. Together, they dragged, their lungs burning with effort, the siren's hair cutting into Lily's flesh like wire. The chamber echoed with the sickening sounds of skin tearing, Lily's shrill cries mixing with the siren's unholy harmony. Then the siren opened her mouth and sang a note so piercing that Ava's vision blurred. Pain lanced through her skull. Her knees buckled, her grip slipping. The others faltered too, clutching their heads, and in that instant of weakness, the siren yanked. Lily screamed once, high, sharp, and final, before the black water swallowed her whole. The pool went still, the surface smoothing as though she had never been there at all. The silence that followed was worse than the song. Ava's chest heaved as she stared at the water, waiting for Lily to resurface. Marcus staggered backward, his hands trembling, eyes wide with shock. Claire's twin collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably, her screams muffled by her palms. But the sirens did not relent. Their laughter rose again, softer this time, taunting. The pool rippled, and faintly, impossibly, Lily's voice joined the melody. Ava's heart seized. No, it wasn't possible. But the sound was unmistakable. Lily was singing with them now, her tone blending perfectly, carrying the same intoxicating pull. Marcus's face contorted with rage. He snatched a loose stone from the cavern floor and hurled it at the nearest siren. It struck her shoulder, and for a moment her body faltered, the song hitching. The others hissed, their perfect faces twisting, and the glow of the chamber seemed to darken in fury. "You want us?" Marcus roared, his voice breaking. "Come and take us." The sirens smiled. Not with amusement this time, but with hunger. They began to climb fully from the pool, their forms towering, their tails dragging wet streaks across the stone. The song deepened into something older, heavier, a sound that shook dust from the cavern's ceiling. The air thickened as if the ocean itself was pressing down, and Ava realized with bone-deep dread that Lily's death had been only the beginning. The sirens were done luring. Now, they were coming. The chamber shook as the sirens advanced, their bodies emerging fully from the pool. In the dim bioluminescent glow, Ava saw them in all their impossible horror. Their torsos were deceptively human, skin smooth, faces sculpted in beauty that hurt to look at, but below the waist, their forms twisted into tails that were not elegant like mermaids, but monstrous. Scaled, slick, and serpentine, they slithered across the stone with an awful grace, each movement accompanied by a wet slap that echoed like thunder in the chamber. Their hair, still dripping black water, writhed like living strands, tangling and twitching as though tasting the air. Marcus raised another stone, shouting curses at them, but the sirens did not flinch. They spread out, surrounding the group with a predatory patience, their black eyes reflecting no mercy, no soul. The song shifted again, no longer a melody of seduction but a rhythm of command, low and resonant, vibrating through the bones of the cavern. It wasn't trying to lure anymore, it was trying to break them. Ava clutched Claire's hand tighter, nails digging into her palm, using the pain as an anchor. She wanted to scream, to run, but where could they go? Behind them was only the narrow tunnel, and ahead, these creatures blocking the way. Her heart pounded with the memory of Lily's scream, cut short by water, her voice now enslaved to the song forever. Marcus hurled the stone at the lead siren. It struck her chest with a dull crack, but instead of retreating, she let out a shriek so high-pitched it felt like knives against their eardrums. Marcus staggered, clutching his head, blood trickling from his nose. The flashlight lay useless on the ground, dark and shattered from earlier. They were nearly blind, relying only on the sickly glow from the cavern walls. Then Ava noticed something strange. The glow was shifting. The veins in the stone pulsed faster, brighter, as if responding to the siren's presence. The entire chamber was alive, throbbing with rhythm. She realized with icy dread that this cavern wasn't just their lair, it was part of them. Claire's twin whimpered, pulling at Ava's sleeve. "They want us in the water," she whispered shakily. "That's where they feed. That's where they keep us." The words rang true. Ava remembered the relics on the walls, the piles of bones, the clothes displayed like offerings. This wasn't random killing. It was ritual. The sirens hissed in unison, their tails scraping the rock as they drew closer. One of them darted forward suddenly, her hair whipping out like a lash. It wrapped around Marcus's wrist, jerking him off balance. He roared, yanking free, but another strand lashed across his face, leaving a searing welt. He stumbled back, nearly falling into the pool. "Go!" Marcus barked hoarsely, shoving Ava toward the tunnel. "Run!" But even as he said it, two sirens slithered toward the opening, cutting off their escape. Their tails slapped hard against the rock, sealing the way with their glistening bodies. The tunnel was no longer an exit, it was a dead end. The pool behind them churned violently. Bubbles rose to the surface, and from the depths, something massive stirred. The song deepened into a chorus so heavy it vibrated the very air, and Ava realized with dawning horror that the sirens they faced were only part of the nightmare. Something larger, something ancient, was waking below. Ava's body shook with terror. She turned to Claire, her voice breaking. "What do we do?" Claire's eyes were wide, reflecting the faint glow. "We don't fight them here," she whispered. "We go deeper. We find another way out. Before it wakes." Ava wanted to protest, wanted to demand how she knew this, but there was no time. The chamber trembled again, a deep rumble rolling through the stone like distant thunder. The sirens hissed and parted slightly, their black eyes darting toward the pool as if in reverence. For a brief, terrible second, their attention shifted. Marcus seized the moment. He grabbed a jagged rock from the ground and hurled it at the wall, shattering one of the glowing veins. Sparks of light flared and fizzled, momentarily distracting the sirens. "Move," he bellowed, shoving Ava and Claire toward a narrow side passage almost hidden behind a curtain of dripping stone. The group scrambled toward it, their shoes slipping on wet rock. The passage was barely wide enough to squeeze through, scraping their shoulders raw as they shoved themselves into the darkness. Behind them, the sirens shrieked, their voices turning sharp and violent. The pool erupted in a froth of water, and the cavern shook so hard dust rained from the ceiling. Ava risked one last glance over her shoulder. In the faint light, she saw it, something massive rising just beneath the water, its silhouette blotting out the glow. A shape with too many limbs, too many eyes, shifting in impossible ways. The sirens bowed their heads as it stirred, their song now reverent, submissive. The group stumbled deeper into the side passage, swallowed by darkness. And behind them, the lair awakened fully. The side passage twisted sharply, forcing Ava to crawl on her knees through the damp rock. The air was thick, humid, and carried a bitter metallic tang, as though the walls themselves were bleeding. Her palms slipped on the wet surface, every scrape and cut stinging as she dragged herself forward. Claire's breathing was ragged behind her, and Marcus, bruised and bloodied, brought up the rear, grunting each time the narrow stone tore at his shoulders. The tunnel felt endless, and Ava's chest tightened with panic at the thought that it might suddenly collapse, trapping them alive in the Sirens' lair. The deeper they went, the less sound of the sirens carried behind them, though every now and then Ava swore she heard a faint wail, echoing faintly through the stone like a ghostly memory. What unsettled her more was the silence between those cries, too deep, too unnatural, as if the earth itself were holding its breath. The tunnel widened suddenly, spitting them out into a cavern unlike anything she had seen before. It was vast, a dome-shaped chamber where the ceiling was lost in shadows. Veins of the same eerie bioluminescence streaked across the walls, but here, the light pulsed in rhythmic intervals, like the slow heartbeat of some slumbering monster. At the center of the chamber lay ruins, stone pillars, broken statues, and fragments of architecture that clearly did not belong to nature. Ava staggered toward them, brushing her fingers across the surface of a fallen column. Symbols were etched deep into the stone, spirals and jagged lines that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. They weren't random carvings. They were warnings. Stories. Marcus limped closer, his voice low. This isn't just their nest, this place was built by people. Long before us. Claire shivered, hugging herself. And it wasn't abandoned, she whispered. It was buried. Ava's eyes drifted to one of the statues still intact. It depicted a woman with flowing hair and sharp features, but her mouth was open unnaturally wide, carved into a scream or a song. Around her feet were smaller figures, men and women, kneeling, hands covering their ears. Ava's stomach turned as she realized what the carving showed. The sirens weren't just monsters of the sea. They had once been worshipped. The ground trembled faintly, a reminder of the thing rising in the pool behind them. Dust rained down in thin streams, and somewhere deep in the labyrinth, water surged like a tide. The ruins weren't safe, not truly. But Ava's curiosity gnawed at her panic. She touched another column and felt an almost electric hum beneath her fingertips, as though the stone remembered centuries of terror. Marcus kicked at a fragment of rubble, his jaw clenched. We need to find a way out. If that thing wakes fully, it won't matter if we're hiding in here or not. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the same gnawing fear that twisted in Ava's chest. Claire crouched suddenly, pointing at the ground. In the dust lay faint markings, like footprints. But they were too fresh, too clean to have been here for centuries. Ava bent closer, her breath catching. They weren't footprints of shoes, they were bare, human feet. And there were many of them. They've been here, Claire whispered, her voice breaking. They still come here. Not just the sirens. Ava's head snapped toward her. What do you mean, they? Before Claire could answer, a sound rolled through the chamber. It wasn't a siren's wail. It was deeper, more guttural, a low moan that vibrated in their ribs. The air grew colder, and the veins of light along the walls brightened, beating faster. Whatever stirred beneath the lair was moving closer, and the labyrinth was responding like a living organism, its veins carrying warning pulses. Then they heard it, a shuffle of feet from one of the tunnels leading deeper into the cavern. Ava's blood froze. At first, she thought it was another siren, but the sound was wrong. It was slower, heavier, dragging. She strained her eyes toward the darkness, and for a moment, she saw it. A figure. Human-shaped. Standing just beyond the glow of the bioluminescence, swaying slightly. Marcus tensed, grabbing a loose rock. Stay behind me. The figure stepped forward, revealing its face, or what was left of it. Skin pale, eyes clouded, mouth open in a slack expression of misery. Its clothes were tattered, soaked with seawater. Ava recognized the logo on the torn fabric. It was a university hoodie. Her chest constricted. "Oh my God, that's Jason," she whispered. Jason, one of the students who had vanished 2 summers ago. His picture had been plastered on news articles, his disappearance chalked up to drowning. But he hadn't drowned. He had been taken. And now, he was something less than human, something hollow. Jason's head tilted, and when he opened his mouth, the sound that came out wasn't a voice, it was the song. The Sirens' melody, but broken, cracked, spilling from his throat like shattered glass. It wasn't luring them. It was warning them. The ruins shook violently, and Ava knew with certainty that the Sirens were no longer the only threat. The thing beneath the beach, their god, their master, was waking. And it wanted out. Jason staggered forward, the sickly light of the cavern illuminating his ruined face. His skin was waxy, bloated, like someone who had spent too long submerged in the ocean. His eyes, once alive with the mischievous spark of a college student on a beach trip, were now cloudy marbles that seemed to look straight through Ava. But it was his mouth that rooted her to the spot, lips torn, throat quivering, spilling that fractured siren song as if his body had been turned into nothing more than a broken instrument. The sound burrowed into Ava's skull, not hypnotic like the siren's usual song, but jagged, discordant, wrong. Claire clamped her hands over her ears, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Make it stop. God, please, make it stop," she sobbed, her voice muffled by her trembling palms. Marcus dropped the rock he'd been holding, his knuckles white, his face twisted in horror. "That's not a song," he whispered hoarsely. "That's a warning. He's warning us." Jason convulsed, his body jerking as if pulled by invisible strings. From his throat came another sound, this one not words, not melody, but a low drone, a vibration that made the stone itself tremble. The ground beneath their feet began to pulse in rhythm with it, and Ava felt it in her bones, deep in her marrow. It was the heartbeat of something enormous, something waking beneath them. She reached out, unable to stop herself, her trembling hand brushing Jason's damp sleeve. His body was ice cold, his flesh clammy, but for a fleeting instant his cloudy eyes flickered, and she saw him, really saw him. Jason. The boy who had been lost. His mouth moved, shaping words that scraped out through the broken melody. "It's coming." Then his body snapped backward with a crack like breaking wood. His chest expanded unnaturally, skin splitting in thin lines that glowed faintly with the same bioluminescent veins on the walls. From those cracks poured the song, louder now, no longer fractured but whole. It wasn't just Jason anymore, it was the entire beach singing through him. The walls vibrated, loose stones raining down like hail, and the pool of water behind them began to churn violently, waves slamming against the cavern's edge though no tide should have reached this deep. Claire screamed, scrambling back toward the ruins, her sobs bouncing wildly in the echoing chamber. Marcus grabbed Ava's arm, pulling her away from Jason. "We have to go. Ava, we have to go, he's not him anymore." His voice cracked with desperation, but Ava couldn't tear her eyes away from the grotesque spectacle. Jason's ribs bulged, his chest cavity distending outward until with a sickening rip, his sternum split open. The sound that erupted wasn't human. It was a chorus, dozens of voices layered over one another, singing in perfect, haunting harmony. Male voices, female voices, some high and childlike, others deep and resonant, all woven into one. The hollow choir. Ava staggered back, bile rising in her throat. Every missing student, every lost wanderer, every soul who had followed the Sirens' song, all of their voices were inside Jason now, bound together in one endless hymn to something that should never have had worshippers. The realization crashed over her, the Sirens weren't merely predators. They were harvesters. They didn't kill all of their victims, they transformed some of them into conduits. Into instruments. Claire collapsed to her knees, rocking back and forth, her eyes wide and unfocused. "They don't die," she whispered, her voice hollow. They never die. They just sing forever. The ruins responded to the choir. The carvings along the columns glowed faintly, light seeping into the cracks of the stone floor. The ground shifted beneath their feet, revealing faint spiral patterns etched into the earth that had been hidden by centuries of dust. Ava's breath caught in her throat. The chamber wasn't just a ruin, it was a stage. A cathedral built underground, designed for this exact purpose. The sirens weren't merely singing. They were summoning. Jason's body collapsed forward, twitching, the song still pouring from his chest cavity like wind through a broken organ. The sound swelled, unbearable, vibrating through their teeth, their skulls, until Ava thought her head might split open. The water surged higher, frothing violently, and something vast stirred within its depths. She couldn't see it fully yet, only hints of movement, shadows twisting like serpents beneath the waves, a massive form rising slowly as if testing the air. Marcus dragged Ava toward one of the side tunnels, his voice ragged. "Now! We move now, or we're dead." But as they stumbled toward the tunnel, Jason's hand shot out, impossibly fast, his broken fingers clamping around Ava's ankle. His grip was iron, cold as stone, holding her in place. His cloudy eyes locked on hers, and for a split second she saw herself reflected in them, her mouth open, her throat glowing, her body hollowed into nothing but another vessel for the choir. Marcus yanked her free, kicking Jason's arm until the brittle bones cracked. Ava fell forward, gasping, her chest heaving, and scrambled to her feet. Claire clung to her side, sobbing hysterically, as they stumbled into the dark passage, the sound of the hollow choir swelling behind them until it seemed to fill the entire earth. As they fled, Ava glanced back one last time. Jason was still kneeling in the center of the ruins, his broken chest glowing, his mouth moving in harmony with hundreds of unseen voices. The water was rising fast, spilling over the edges of the cavern. And in that moment, Ava realized with a cold clarity that nearly stopped her heart. The sirens weren't singing to lure them anymore. They were singing to wake something far older. The tunnel sloped downward, slick with moisture, as Ava, Marcus, and Claire scrambled through it with frantic desperation. Their lungs burned, their legs felt like lead, but behind them the choir still roared, a hollow, endless hymn that shook the very stone around them. It wasn't just a song anymore. It was a vibration, a living force pushing through the labyrinth, rattling bones, loosening teeth, threatening to tear them apart from the inside. Ava pressed her hand to her ear, but it was useless. The sound came from within, echoing inside her skull. The passage spat them out onto a ledge that overlooked a vast subterranean bay. The roof of the cavern arched so high above them it was lost in shadow, but the water stretched on forever, black and restless, lapping against jagged stone. At the far end of the bay, a monstrous shape broke the surface, a ridge of slick, scaly flesh, rising like the back of some primeval beast. Ava froze, her chest tightening. It wasn't just large. It was impossible. The curve alone stretched further than the lighthouse above ground. Whatever was emerging dwarfed the ruins, dwarfed the sirens, dwarfed them all. Claire let out a strangled cry and clutched Ava's arm, trembling so violently she could barely stand. That's not real. It can't be real," she whimpered. But the water rose higher, and with it came the stench of brine and rot, so strong it gagged them. Marcus leaned heavily against the wall, his eyes wide, his voice broken. The sirens, they weren't the monsters. They were the priests. His words hung heavy in the cavern, and Ava felt the truth settle in her stomach like ice. The sirens were never the end, they were caretakers, guardians, feeding souls into the pit, keeping their god asleep with offerings of voices and blood. And now, with Jason's body split open as their conduit, the ritual was complete. A sound like thunder cracked the air as something enormous slammed against the cavern walls. The water surged toward them, waves crashing against the ledge, spraying them with icy foam. Ava's eyes darted to the carved spirals on the ground, the same patterns they'd seen in the ruins. The ledge wasn't just stone. It was part of a seal. And it was breaking. A deafening roar, neither fully animal nor human, erupted from the deep. It rattled the ledge beneath their feet, dust and pebbles raining down like a storm. Ava staggered, grabbing Marcus for balance. She felt the vibration of that roar deep in her sternum, a sound that seemed to claw at the fabric of reality itself. The walls of the bay glowed faintly now, the veins of light pulsing faster, almost frantic, as if the earth itself was trying to contain the thing rising within it. From the churning water, a shape began to form. Not a body, not fully, more like a shadow made flesh, shifting and swelling, its edges indistinct. The siren's song built into a crescendo behind them, the hollow choir amplifying it until it became unbearable. Ava's ears bled, warm liquid ran down her neck. Claire screamed, a raw, animal sound of pure terror. But in the chaos, Ava noticed something. The spirals carved into the ledge beneath them were glowing. They weren't just decoration. They were the key. A seal. A prison. The choir wasn't just summoning, it was undoing. Her eyes locked with Marcus's, and she saw the same realization flash in his. The seal, he shouted above the roar. We have to finish the seal. Claire's eyes widened with disbelief. Finish it? How? With what? Ava looked down. The carvings were incomplete, lines broken, spirals unfinished. Centuries of erosion had worn them away. But the glow suggested the seal still lived, still hungered for completion. Without thinking, Ava dropped to her knees, clawing at the ground. She smeared her blood, still dripping from her ears and the cuts on her hands, into the grooves, tracing the spirals, completing the broken pattern with trembling fingers. The effect was instant. The glow surged brighter, blinding white for a moment, and the water screamed, yes, screamed, like a living thing in pain. The massive shadow writhed violently, thrashing against the bay, waves exploding upward like geysers. Jason's voice, Jason's hollow choir, cracked with fury. The melody broke into chaos, no longer harmonious but discordant, desperate. The seal was fighting back, and the choir was trying to drown it out. Ava's body convulsed as the sound drilled into her skull, but she kept smearing her blood into the stone, finishing the spirals, ignoring her shaking hands. Marcus dropped beside her, tearing his palm open on a jagged rock and pressing his blood into the carvings too. Claire, sobbing hysterically, did the same, her tears mixing with the crimson on the stone. The seal flared, light coursing through the ledge, down into the water, into the depths. The shadow convulsed, roaring in fury, but the glow seared it, forcing it downward. Ava felt the power humming through her bones, ancient and violent. The god of the Sirens was being dragged back into its prison. The cavern shook violently, stones cracking, water erupting upward. A fissure split the ledge, and Ava nearly fell through before Marcus hauled her back. She clung to him, gasping, her vision blurring, as the light grew so intense she could see nothing else. The last thing she heard was the hollow choir's scream of despair, shattering into silence. When Ava opened her eyes again, she was lying on the beach. The sun was rising, casting the horizon in pale gold. The tide lapped gently at the shore, innocent and calm, as though nothing had ever been wrong. Claire sat beside her, staring blankly at the waves, her hair matted with blood and salt. Marcus was standing at the water's edge, his shoulders slumped, staring down at the wet sand. There was no sign of the cave. No ruins. No sirens. Just the endless sea, deceptively calm. Ava pushed herself up on trembling arms, her body aching, her throat raw. We stopped it, she whispered, almost too afraid to believe it. Marcus didn't turn. His voice was quiet, broken. We delayed it. Ava frowned, confusion cutting through her exhaustion. Then she saw what he was staring at. In the wet sand, where the tide had just retreated, words were written in long, perfect letters. Not by human hands, but by the sea itself. We will sing again. The waves rushed forward, erasing the letters, but Ava knew the truth in her bones. They hadn't destroyed the Sirens. They hadn't destroyed their god. They had only reminded it that they existed. And it would not forget them. The group uses their blood to reactivate the ancient seal, forcing the god of the Sirens back into its prison, but not forever. The sunrise brings false relief, shattered by the chilling message written in the sand. We will sing again. The terror isn't over. It's only waiting.